Welcome to the Own My Life podcast. I'm Abi Thomas, and it is a joy to be with you as we meet amazing women who've all been through the Own My Life course, a 12-week course which enables women who've been subjected to abuse to regain ownership of their lives. Joy is a key value for us here at Own My Life, so be aware you will hear painful stories of many types of abuse, but you will also hear a lot of joy. You may realise as you listen that you or someone you know needs help or support to get safe. The National Domestic Abuse Helpline is 0808 2000 247, and if you have concerns that a man is behaving in an unsafe way to a partner, you could contact the Respect Perpetrator phone line. You'll find all these details in the show notes, along with other helpful links such as a PDF about the cycle of abuse, which we will talk about today. Natalie Collins, creator of the Own My Life course and CEO of Own My Life. Welcome back to the Own My Life podcast.
Hello, hello.
How are you today?
I am glorious.
You are glorious, it's true. You are glorious. So each week, Natalie, the Own My Life course, which is a 12-week course, which women can either come to or be accompanied through one-to-one or can do online. There are a number of online courses. Each week, the course starts with everybody choosing a favourite thing after the fruit and biscuits and drinks and chat and welcome. So today's question for you is, what is your favourite activity?
My favourite activity is swimming. Now, as much as I'm aware that wild swimming and sea swimming, lots of people love it, I think that is mad. And I like swimming in a swimming pool with water that has been heated. And I swim for half an hour every day in the morning. And it has been revolutionary to help me to be my best self. So I love doing that every day. I feel like I'm gliding through the water. It's as close as you can get to flying. While actually being a human being. So like to swim in the water, I know it puts me in a beautiful headspace. So that is my favourite thing each day.
One of the early things in the course is talking about bilateral movement, and Monty, who we're going to hear from in just a moment, who shares her story with us today on the podcast, talks a bit about music and bilateral movement and how it's important to us. So perhaps for people who listen to this, and it is quite, can be very traumatising listening to somebody else's story, especially if it relates to your own. How can bilateral movement, swimming is as an example of that, what is bilateral movement and how can it help?
Yeah, so in the course, we do a very basic activity, which is hard to explain if you're not watching me doing it, even though it's very easy. So what we encourage people to do is put their hands on their laps, on their thighs, and then just gently tap slowly, one hand, then the other, one hand, then the other, quite slowly. And any form of bilateral movement, basically, it's a fancy way for moving both sides of your body. So left side, right side, left side, right side. So running or swimming or walking are all bilateral movement. Hopping is not, because it's only one leg. So just basically anything that's one-sided is not going to in your body. But basically what it does is it ensures that your left and right brain keep talking to each other, because the left side of our brain controls the right side of our body, and the right side of our brain controls the left side of our body broadly. So what happens is when we're traumatized, that left and right side of our brain are not talking to each other as well as they could, and it can make us feel very sluggish. It can make it feel like we can't really move our body, or it's taken an awful lot of effort to move our body. When we're in this state, we can think we're a bit mad because it feels like we've got very severe flu, where your body's just like, I can't move it. And then you're like, but there's nothing wrong with me. And then you just think, am I going mad? And actually, it's just part of how our body's trying to protect us. So any form of physical movement of our body that uses both our left and our right side is incredibly useful to keep us from becoming dissociated or becoming very traumatized. So within the course, we encourage women to sort of tap their thighs gently, one left and then right, if they're struggling, or you can tap your feet, or, it's just that sense of physically moving your body on both sides.
Wonderful. Well, perhaps that will be helpful as we listen to Monty's interview. Monty is a wonderful woman, as are all the women that I had the absolute joy of travelling around the UK to meet all these wonderful people. And Monty, this wonderful woman, is going to share her story with us today. So Monty, welcome to the Own My Life podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute joy to meet you. Could you start by just telling me some of the things that bring you joy at the moment?
Where I work at the moment, we have newborn babies. Some of the women at the centre have babies. So when they come out of hospital, they come straight to us and we get to see the newborn babies and then we get to see them develop. I love that.
What is the nature of your work? What do you do?
I work in the housing sector in temporary accommodation.
Children just bring so much joy, don't they? I mean, they're so funny.
They do. You know, I can be doing something and feeling a bit stressed and I see their little faces. The other thing that brings me joy is going to visit my family and going on holiday with them. So recently to Devon by the seaside, that brought me a lot of joy. Just being outdoors, you know, seeing the birds. It's a lovely, lovely sense of freedom.
I remember the first time we spoke and you looked out your window and saw a little robin sitting bathing in your garden. I could hear your face lighting up over the phone as you described the bird.
That's 100% something that brings me joy. It still does.
So tell me a little bit about you.
At the moment, I live in a bungalow. I came to the bungalow about 4 years ago because I left my home. So my previous house was with my ex-partner. I left there and had nowhere to go. I ended up in a women's refuge, just with very few belongings. When I arrived at the bungalow, there was nothing there. It was empty. No carpets, no blinds, no nothing. And for I would say the first 3 or 4 weeks, I slept on the floor in the bedroom on some cardboard and blankets and things that I had.
So you've had quite a journey. You're on the Own My Life podcast because you've been through the Own My Life course. It would be great if you're comfortable to tell me a little bit about the relationship that you were in.
I was in a relationship for 23 years and it was a toxic, abusive relationship, even although there was elements of the relationship where good things happened. When I arrived at the refuge, the following day, they asked me if I wanted to do the Own My Life course. On the first few days of the course, I started to see my life on paper in black and white. Over the 4 years since I've gone, you know, I've been accepting what's happened. And in the Own My Life course, one of the things that struck me immediately was the Biderman chart and the Biderman behaviours. The Biderman chart was related to, I think he was called Albert Biderman, who'd created this chart for prisoners of war in Korea and how they used tactics to coerce and manipulate and make the prisoners of war comply. But those behaviours of brainwashing, isolating, I looked at that and I thought, that's my relationship. You know, my ex-partner has been using all of those behaviours, demanding things, the demander.
You've got those behaviours in front of you now. I can see you're just pulling your Own My Life book out.
They mentioned the exhauster, the humiliator, the isolator, the threatener, the almighty, the brainwasher, the demander, and the nice one. And my relationship over the 23 years went through that whole cycle on a wash. It was just repeat, repeat, repeat. He would behave like the nice one. And then all of a sudden, he might be the threatener or the humiliator. That's what added to the confusion in the relationship.
Can you take me back to the beginning of the relationship? Did this controlling and manipulative and abusive behaviour begin very soon?
It happened very quickly. We met and very quickly we went on holiday together, and then he was asking me to move in with him, to give up my own place. He already would, you know, make me feel uncomfortable. It could have been, you know, how I dressed or the way I spoke, or if I'd spoke to another person. it wasn't according to his liking. There was always something in the beginning that he didn't like. And then the first holiday that we went on together, we travelled abroad to meet his father. His behaviour on the holiday, shouting, being aggressive, humiliating me in public, all happened on the holiday. The local police where we were on holiday actually saw his aggressive behaviour, and they decided to handcuff him and put him in the back of their van, which was a long, long time ago. This was way back at the beginning of the relationship. I ended up sleeping on the beach on my own that night because the police had taken him away. So it was very frightening. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know where he was, how I was going to get back. And then some of the local people helped me to go to the place where the police had taken him. And thankfully, they let him out the next day so that we could fly back to Britain. From the very, very beginning, he had told me about his abusive childhood and his abusive life. So although he was being aggressive and humiliating me in public and, showing toxic behaviour, I put it down to the fact that he'd had a really bad childhood. I'd had a loving family. So I felt that his behaviour was because of that bad upbringing. So I wanted to love him and care for him. And I thought if I give him more love, that behaviour might change, it might get better.
Did you notice a change in the behaviour over time, his abusive behaviour towards you?
What I realise now is some of the behaviours changed. The physical abuse, the rage, the anger, humiliating me in public, at times got less. But I realise now that because I was moulding my behaviour towards him and his expectations, I was complying with him, and in a way I was obeying the way he wanted. What I thought was a change in behaviour was everything was still there. It was me who was modifying my behaviour, my lifestyle to fit around him. My needs weren't important. They were just pushed to the background. And the whole relationship was about him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. I know you used to call him King Stephen.
I did. That was it. If he wanted something and he asked for something, it had to be done immediately. Because if it wasn't done immediately, then that Jekyll and Hyde behaviour would show, and then he would be angry and aggressive. I learned over the years that saying no wasn't a good idea. It was best for me just to say yes.
And what were the consequences of you saying no? Are you happy to talk a little more? Happy is the wrong word. Are you comfortable to talk about some of the physical abuse and how he would treat you?
Yeah, in the first 10 years of the relationship, the physical abuse was towards my head or my face or my eyes. And I used to say to him, do not hurt my head. And then I would end up the next day and going to work trying to cover up the bruises and the black eyes. And usually that physical abuse was as a result of his perception that I was maybe flirting with other men, which in my brain wasn't the case. I was just having fun like everybody else. Usually we'd be in a group, we were having fun together. What I thought was just me enjoying myself became a problem.
He'd created a rule for you that you had to obey, and which is ridiculous. Anyone can have a conversation with anybody else and there should be no physical reaction for that, should there? No matter, even if you were flirting, a punch is not acceptable, is it?
Exactly, it's not acceptable. Over the years, I started to lose confidence, maybe lose belief in myself. I started to question myself and think, well, actually, is it me? Am I being too friendly? For example, if I went to the shops and I was too long at the shops, he would be saying, well, who takes that long at the shop? Who takes that long to go and get some bread and milk? But maybe when I was at the shops, I was chatting to somebody else, or I'd seen something in one of the other shops that I liked, and I would go in. Then I realised as time went on that if I just went and got what I had to get and came back, I kind of knew the time limit, that if I was back in a certain time, everything would be okay. So that was all feeding into this thing about his needs, making sure he was okay, making sure he was happy. King Stephen's life was the most important life in the world.
How do you look back now? You've done this Own My Life course. What did you learn about the reasons you stayed in that relationship for 23 years? Do you have compassion on yourself?
Yeah, I've learned a lot about the reasons why I stayed in a relationship. The Own My Life course has helped with that. I was brought up in a Catholic family. You know, that religious influence was there about how you treat people. Do unto others as you would have them do to yourself. Treat people kindly, forgive people, understand people, be compassionate towards people. So in my mind, I wasn't making excuses for his behaviour. Looking back throughout the time, I realised that there was toxic behaviour, but I believed that I was doing the right thing. My frame of reference was kindness, support, help, understanding, look at what he's been through. That was my frame of reference. So that definitely influenced me staying for 23 years. And his frame of reference was power, control, entitlement, ownership, abuse, manipulation, humiliation, dishonesty.
Did he use sexual abuse as a means of control as well?
There was sexual control because there was things that I felt uncomfortable with, and my instinct and my gut instinct was telling me that I don't feel comfortable with this, and my boundaries were always being crossed. And again, I started questioning myself. Maybe it's me. I'm the one that's got a problem with sex.
And did the course help you to understand that? How did you feel when you read that other people had also been through those experiences?
It was a relief for me to know that I wasn't alone. And it was a relief to know that I wasn't going crazy, that these things are real things, that they're really happening. I'd been blamed for so many things related to sex. That made me feel that, I'm okay.
Yeah, you're not alone.
I'm not alone.
And it's not your fault. Did you get that feeling? I feel like doing the course really re-emphasises over and over again, this is not your fault.
Yes.
Did you feel that?
It definitely helped me to feel this is not my fault, because I was blaming myself and feeling guilty, and there was a big sense of betrayal because I went to the women's refuge and I was doing the course. There was so much conflict going on inside my mind. It was helping me with that. And in one part of the course, it said that people who go no contact, the longer they can go no contact, the more chance they have of rebuilding their life, recovering and starting to empower themselves. Because by the end of the 23 years, I was totally brainwashed. And that was the beginning of my recovery. And the course was really planting a seed to help me to rebuild my life. It didn't happen quickly. It didn't happen overnight. And even some of the really serious things where, I was blamed for things related around sex, I realised that some of that stuff was non-consensual. But I didn't realise at the time. He didn't want to take accountability for anything that he did, for his behaviour, for the way he was. It was always me.
Mm. You became a carer for Steve. You had to make sure that he had the right medication. The dynamic of your relationship changed. I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that made it more difficult to leave as well.
That made it very difficult to leave because he had a heart attack in his 30s. Later on, he started to have COPD, breathing problems, And then he had another big serious operation because of his legs, and his mobility was starting to get affected. He was taking about 6 or 7 medications every day that he couldn't administer, because although he was a talented man and he was skilled with his hands, he wasn't good with reading and writing. He wasn't good with hospital appointments, doctor's appointments, anything to do with that. He left all of that to me. You know, how could I possibly go? How's he going to cope?
So tell me about the day you left. What happened?
I'd left many times before and always gone back to various friends or sisters, or slept on somebody's sofa. Or once when I left, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was in the street with nothing, and I never ever went to the police. I never really spoke to anybody about this. That was in the very early days, and a police car passed, and I was walking about in the streets on my own as a woman. But I think I waved to the police car or something like that, and they spoke to me. I told them what had happened, that I'd run away from the house because I was frightened, because he was in a rage, he was aggressive and drunk and shouting at me. All the police did was took me to the train station. So they gave me a blanket that I wrapped around me, and I went on a train all the way back to Scotland. You know, I sat on that train feeling humiliated, feeling awful, because I was just there with nothing. And I stayed with my mum for a while, and then I went back again because I kept going back all of the time. So this time, after 23 years, they offered me a place in the refuge, and I had to make a decision there and then. And I said yes. So I grabbed some things, drove away from the house, and they said, when you're so many miles away from the house, phone and we'll tell you where we are. Because the build up to that was, he had threatened me, and he was saying things where I wasn't sure about my safety, about what he'll do to me. And I thought, I don't know what that means. I don't feel safe. Over the 12 months before I left, the threats started to seem a bit heavier, and I'd made a comment about, you know, I don't want to die, and I don't want you to go to prison.
You lost a lot through leaving. I mean, you lost the security of a home, financial security. I know you had animals that you left behind.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a leading question. But do you regret leaving and losing those things?
Obviously, it's lovely to have comfort and lovely to have those things, but I'm more interested in people. I'm more interested in the peace and having a happy life and a healthy life.
You mentioned resistance. That's something that's really honoured throughout the course. You talked a little bit about how you resisted the violence at the beginning of our conversation. Can you think of any other examples of resistance and sort of knocking back this idea that women just put up with abuse, we just accept it, but there is actually resistance even when you are in a situation where you are being subjected to abuse?
No stone was left unturned. An example of the resistance as well is, over the years it got to a stage where if he was kicking off and being aggressive, then I would think to myself, okay, this is not a good time for me to have this conversation. So I would remove myself from it. That's a form of resistance. I was protecting myself by going away from it. And then I learned to use the bedroom as my sanctuary. So I would go to the bedroom to recalibrate and bring myself back to earth. And while I was up there, I was doing things to help myself. It could have been writing in a journal. It could have been meditating. It could have been reading to find out what's going on with his behaviour. And sometimes I would use sleep as medicine. You know, I would go and sleep to deal with the trauma that just happened. And then he would come in and bang the door open, turn the light on and say, you know, because he liked to swear a lot, I'm not going to swear on this. It wasn't a polite way of saying get out of your bed. The lights would go on. Who do you think you're? You're not going to lie there now and think that you're going to be sleeping all day. Looking back over the years, I was in survival mode a lot of the time because I was still working. and I was still managing the house, and I was still having to go out and deal with the world out there, and then go back and deal with the world inside. And they're two very different worlds. And I'm not the only person who's doing that. There's so many people who are doing the same thing. I was also managing my internal world, because my internal world was telling me that, in a way, I was invisible. There was this me inside my body shouting, I'm in here.
You haven't told many people about what happened to you, Monty.
No.
Many of your family didn't know much about this at all. Why have you decided to speak about it now?
I'm finding my voice now, because I've been rebuilding my life and rediscover things about myself that were actually okay, that it was perfectly fine behaviour. If one person can do the On My Life course and learn from it, or even learn from something that we have said today, then it would be great, because it is possible. I didn't believe, that I would be able to be in this position to rebuild my life, but it's definitely possible.
One thing you said to me when we spoke, and it's really, I think it's really profound. You said entitlement, power and control was a trickle effect in your relationship. Learning to understand the situation is a trickle effect the other way.
The trickle effect, or the drip effect, built up over 23 years, and I was so brainwashed and entrenched, and everything went with that. I used to find the humiliation particularly painful. When I was out in public, if he started shouting and calling me abusive names, really abusive names, people could hear and they were looking on. I was thinking, gosh, people are going to believe that I'm that kind of woman or that kind of person. When I started the On My Life course, and I saw it in black and white on the page, and I'm thinking, this is a real thing. This is what's been happening in my life. It was trickle, trickle, drip, drip the other way. I was minimising all that behaviour and trying to find a way to help him or change or fix him, which now I know we can't change anybody. We can't fix anybody. They've got to decide to do that themselves. And then as time went on, I would gradually see, okay, that's why that happened, or that was related to, his demanding behaviour, or that was isolating me. My brain, and I think most people's brain, can only cope with so much at a time. And then there was the times when, I'd been crying. I would think about the indulgences, the nice things that he did, the gifts that he gave me, the way he behaved, and then I would be horrified at myself and think, oh my God, have I done the right thing? But then I would sleep on it and I would be okay. And fast forward 4 years, I'm a lot stronger than I was that first day. But the process is still going on.
One of the beautiful things in the course, you start each week by asking a question, what's your favourite ice cream flavour, or giving people a choices back in their life.
Yes.
And at the end of the course, you explain what are your feelings, how do you feel, where do you feel these sensations in your body, and starting to own your own feelings again. Were those things significant for you?
Yes. It's such an incredible thing to even start thinking again about what is your favourite food, or what's your favourite ice cream, or talk about something joyful. But I loved that part of it. In fact, in a way, focused on me starting to regain my life, what I think, what I believe, that I've got a right to say no, that I don't have to have the same opinion as another person. It's not a reason for that person to abuse me. In the course, they go through a session called Power, Threat, Meaning Framework. That really helped me get clarification, because there's questions in it about what happened to me. So I was able to think, what happened to me? Well, I gave my power away to a man. Unintentionally, unaware, not deliberately. I put him first. The Power Threat Framework helped me to put that focus on back, rebuilding me in my life. It talks about how did the threats affect me, and they affected me badly. It affected my work life, my relationships, my peace of mind, my safety, my self-esteem, my belief in myself, doubting myself, neglecting myself. So the power threat framework was helping me to, see this clearly. That was what the course woke me up to, about the power, the control, the entitlement, the ownership, these attitudes towards women.
You've had 4 years now of freedom from being abused. What has your life looked like since then? What are some of the joyful things? What have been the good things that have come from that new life that you've built for yourself?
The amazing thing that's come from it is being able to get up in the morning and have my breakfast, do my own thing, and know that I'm at peace to do that I can make decisions. If I want to sit for half an hour, have my breakfast, and then go to work, I can do that. It's such a joyful thing. Also, when I'm finished work, coming in the evening, knowing that it's peaceful, it's happy, that it's not going to be, an atmosphere or all the abuse going on. Also, knowing that I can make decisions to meet up with somebody. If I want to meet up with a friend or my sister, I can do that without any problems. That's freedom. Having that freedom to be myself is really joyful.
What a wonderful woman Monty is. I should say that the women who've taken part in this podcast have chosen their own names, and we're not using their real names. What stood out to you, Natalie?
Well, that she's incredible. Fundamentally, 23 years of being subjected to harm. And then, I'm just a bit, I shouldn't be astounded because, the reality is police responses aren't great, but to basically be given a blanket and shoved on a train does not feel like a sufficient criminal justice response to a disclosure of very serious ongoing harm. But I'm really glad that she did get put on a train and to go no contact, to get on an Own My Life course and to just say, oh, no contact gives me more possible chance of moving forward with my life. That's the strength of character to go, that's what I'm going to do. And actually, she uses the language of brainwashing throughout, and that really that's what all of us deal with. It's not specific to women who have an abusive partner. If we've had an abusive partner, we just happen to have had the misfortune of meeting an abuser. But a lot of us will have been conditioned with this idea that if we just love somebody enough, if we just care for them enough, for her, that was a religious framework. For other people, this kind of, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. We all have frameworks that suggest that if we can just love someone enough, romantic films and stories, 50 Shades as a storyline specifically features this kind of, if we just love him enough, he'll change. And so that sense that she had believed that for 23 years, she had had tried so hard, and that then coming on Own My Life gave her this opportunity to be unbrainwashed, to go, oh right, so all this stuff I thought, but the power and strength of her to choose to embrace that truth over the lies, that is incredible. And so I think, it is that sense that what Monty says and what we heard from Jade in the previous episode, this sense of believing it's about his brokenness, that he's disclosed his mental health issues, his childhood trauma, and thinking, oh, that's why he does this. And I think for lots of us and for everybody in society, this sense that hurt people. No, plenty of hurt people don't hurt anybody. Actually, that being hurt leads them to want to create healing and wholeness and goodness. And as Monty really clearly explains, what the Own My Life talks about is, why is someone abusive? They're abusive because they hold beliefs that they own their partner and they're entitled. They have the right to do what they want. And those beliefs, those values, those ideas of what matters and how to relate to somebody inform all of those biodominant behaviours that we've heard about now. And so understanding that the abuser has what Monty here talks about as a frame of reference, has this sense that I own you and I have the right to do what I want to you. Until we understand that an abuser's frame of reference is that, we're going to really struggle to understand what he does, respond appropriately as the person in that relationship with him, but also as the family and friends of him, family and friends of her, as his work colleagues, as a criminal justice system, as everybody, until we really, really grasp the reality of ownership and entitlement. We're not going to be able to really respond to this in a meaningful way.
So where does this sense then in our culture of ownership entitlement, what are some of the reasons that has become so prominent?
So one of the things we're really keen on doing at Own My Life is looking at what is the world that we live in. So I think very often when people think about abuse and they think about recovery, they're thinking about making sense of my individual relationship and potentially my individual trauma and what's going on in my body, what's going in my brain, what's gone on in my relationship. Not all of those things are things we cover, but actually none of that can really make sense unless we look at the wider social and cultural and political context that we're in. And so we are living in a society which promotes ideas of ownership and entitlement all of the time. This idea of, well, why would somebody believe they own their partner? Well, because up to like 150 years ago, men legally owned their wives. The marriage ceremony today still kind of says, who gives this woman to marry this man? Because the idea was she was owned by her father and then owned by her husband. So ownership has a long legal history of men owning women, that so many of our laws are predicated on property, and our sexual violence laws are not about harm of a person fundamentally, they're harm of a property, the woman who is the property of the man. You know, it used to be an offence to rape a woman because it was damaging a man's property, not because it damaged her. So there's something about us understanding that historical context is one part of the world we live in, but also the music we listen to. And Monty talks about music as a power of healing, which it can be, but we're surrounded by songs which are incredibly problematic in what they say. And we have an activity where we explore songs and the words and the lyrics of songs. We look at sexualization and objectification in the media, particularly looking at adverts in the course. We look at the ways that our choices are formally or informally reinforced. So we do lots of work trying to help each of us to make sense of what it means to be a woman in the world and how that will have affected the choices we make and the relationship we have. But fundamentally is the rootedness that this abuser has in beliefs of ownership and entitlement. So we use the image of a tree, which comes from the work of Lundy Bancroft, who talks about abuse is a tree and the roots are ownership. He thinks he owns us. The trunk is entitlement. He thinks he has the right to do what he wants to us and any children. And the branches are that control that women like Monty have just explained so well in terms of what he has done and how terrible that is.
Can I tell you my current least favourite song, which is the Teddy Swims song, I Lose Control.
I know. Yeah,
I lose control when you're not with me, when you're not next to me. It's like, really? So it's her fault?
Yeah. And this kind of sense that it's actually what he's describing is wanting to have control. Because he's not really losing control. He desires to have control of her. And if she's not there, he can't control her. And he's got a very beautiful singing voice. And I know that lots of people love, beautiful, beautiful singing. But actually, we do need to ask questions about what people are singing about and what that normalizes. So, for Monty in her story, that song would really normalize what her partner did. You've got to time how long you go to the shops. You've got to not speak to people. Teddy Swims saying, well, I lose control when you're next to me. Well, entirely normal for in a romantic relationship to expect your partner not to talk to people, expect your partner not to leave you. So it normalizes abusive behavior rather than challenging it. And we really need to be aware of that.
She was 23 years in that relationship, Natalie. Is it unusual to stay in a relationship that long, or is that something that's quite common?
Well, I think probably most of us, if we look around the people in our lives, very few people make it to 23 years in a relationship of any sort now. It's quite incredible for anybody to survive in a relationship for decades, regardless of the kind of quality of that relationship or the sort of people in that relationship. But I would say in terms of an abuser, it's much harder. And one of the activities we have in the Own My Life course is the 7 steps of a breakup, which is all about how much harder it is to leave an abuser than a non-abusive partner, actually. And that's really counterintuitive for people, because we have this idea, if we've not had an abusive partner, and even if we have, we can sometimes still think this, well, if he's awful, it's easier to leave him. If he's abusive, it's easier to leave him. The thing that doesn't take into account is somebody who's abusive will not let their partner leave. They will control their partner. They will stop their partner leaving. They will manipulate them back. Whereas actually, if somebody, we just generally don't get on with them anymore, or we have a clash of values or whatever, and that relationship ends, if somebody's non-abusive, they respect the end of the relationship. And so I think that there is a sense that it's not usual or unusual for somebody to be in a relationship with an abuser for decades. It's probably the same as any other relationship, but there is the reality that it is incredibly hard to leave an abuser. So that generally means a relationship lasts a lot longer than it should have, and a lot longer than it would have done if it was with someone who was not abusive and we didn't get on. But it's complex.
What else stood out to you? I can see you've got a little note in front of you. What?
Well, just like big hearts of how much I love what Monty was articulating in terms of her moving forward and just how incredible she is. I think a couple of things that I'd say was that realising that it wasn't her fault, that she'd blamed herself. And I think understanding why we blame ourselves is incredibly important. One of the reasons we blame ourselves is because he tells us it's our fault, and he consistently forces us to take that responsibility. But part of it is because feeling like it's our fault gives us some power. If I made him do it, I am incredibly powerful. If it's my fault that he kicked off, I'm holding some power. Psychologically, it feels better to be responsible than it does to feel completely powerless. And so I think understanding that is really important. I loved what Monty talked about around the power threat meaning framework. It's incredibly important resource. Everybody can Google it and find out more. It was created by the British Psychological Society. The co-authors, Lucy Johnston and Mary Boyle, are queens. And they have created a framework to offer a way of understanding and making sense of our lives that doesn't require us to have to kind of take on medicalized diagnosis or labels, which are often very reductive and might feel initially very validating, but longer term really don't make sense of the distress or the ways we can recover and move forward. And so I think Monty talking so powerfully about how that framework helped her to make sense of her life is really, really important. And I think when she talked about planting seeds, everything we do at Own My Life is about planting seeds. We cannot make anybody understand anything, but what we can do is scatter seeds and just trust in the strength and capacity and wisdom of women who are like the ground that those seeds are planted in, and that women will go, that makes sense for me, or that makes sense for me. And I think that idea that a 12-week course is not going to fix everything. It's, what it's going to do is give people the tools and resources and ideas that give them the capacity to start working towards that fixing of things. And so it is a lifelong journey. I think Own My Life's not the end of things when you get to the end of 12 weeks, but it is giving us a framework and understanding around that.
Natalie Collins, thank you. That's the end of episode 2. We'll be back with another episode with the wonderful Clara. Have a look at the Own My Life website if you want to find out any more information about the course. You can Google Natalie Collins and find out all wonderful things about you, can't we?
I think so. I hope so. I don't Google myself, so I'm not sure. I'll take your word for that.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Own My Life podcast. We want to say a huge thank you to all the organisations that run Own My Life in the UK and Ireland for everything you are doing to make women's lives better. And finally, to the Community Foundation North East, who have funded this podcast. We are so grateful.